Smash Ultimate has a really interesting specific problem to Ultimate as a game, where we have so many potential stages accessible to play on compared to any other Smash game that are tournament legal, or at least like seen as tournament legal, meet the criteria to be played on. But the stage list we ended up with is so curated of stages that are really simple, where the idea of this counterpick, where you get a stage that has a little more extremes, whether it's in their layout, whether it's in its blast zones, whether it's in its size, just something that is atypical enough to give a character an advantage. And the thing that ended up making me think about this the most was actually a recent video from a creator you probably all know in the Smash scene, Awesome Sauce. He recently did this, he's a Melee creator mainly, and did this video recently about Final Destination, why it kind of sucks in the context of Melee, but why it's important. And it's important because it's the stage, despite not being labeled as a counterpick, because Pokemon Stadium's transformations are weird as shit. But it's a stage that helps other characters play Smash Brothers against the top tiers. Now, I don't personally think there's really like a lot of stages in Ultimate that are as polarizing as Final Destination, because mechanically Melee has things like chain grabs and stuff like that that make platforms really tough to deal with. But the idea of the counterpick of a stage that has a noticeably favorable, like not just like my character does well at the stage, like has a noticeably favorable aspect to the stage that helps the character a lot more than others, has kind of just died. So when we look at what stages are mainly used in competitive Smash, there's really 7 and like 3 kind ofs, but let's be honest, not really. Battlefield, Small Battlefield, Final Destination, Pokemon Stadium 2, Smashville, Town and City, Hollow Bastion. These 7 stages are like the universal 7 that are used in every tournament. There's no exceptions. This is always around. If you notice when looking at these, they're all, especially because of their hazards off too, they're all similar to each other in terms of just general platform layouts. They're similar to each other when we go over here and look at also blast zones. Like, Final Destination has the same side but of smaller ceiling. Hollow Bastion, oh god, it's I think the same as FD. Where's the others? Pokemon Stadium 2, slightly wider blast zones because of its length, but height of FD. Small Battlefield, I didn't even see a new line appear. It's probably the same as FD. Smashville, so far the most unique in terms of blast zones. Small size blast zone, but kind of taller. Honestly, not, but the thing is, this isn't even that big of a gap, and we'll look at other stages in a second otherwise. Town and City, I didn't see anything new appear either. And that's it. Those are the 7, right? Yeah. Very similar in blast zones. Not really a huge difference in terms of that way. And on top of that, most of them are this like medium-sized, outside of Smashville stage. I think even Town City is really, yeah, that's Town City, yeah. Even Town City is not that much of a bigger stage in terms of like base layout. It just has some platforms that end up on the side, and those even shift anyway. So the Universal 7 are pretty... They're different enough, but they're pretty sterilized in terms of actual differences, at least in my opinion. The other 3 stages that aren't really used nowadays, that are... I mean, some are like I think these 3 exist mainly in EU, Kalos sometimes in North America. Definitely, I don't think any of these exist in Japan anymore. But these 3 stages also that used to exist. You have Yoshi's Story, which is by far the most different so far. Just clicking on that. Lilat, which has a unique layout, but is essentially very similar in terms of blast zones, and kind of not it's necessarily functionality. Like it has a very different. Its layout is different due to the slanted stuff, slanted platforms and slanted sides. But its blast zones are still fucking the same as like Small Battlefield or something like that. Still very similar. I'm also using the wrong Lilat because they updated it. That's right. And then last was Kalos, which is by far the biggest blast zones, I believe. No, not even. They don't even have the biggest side blast zones, and they're tied for the biggest top blast zone. The only thing that's different is that they have these platforms that make the stage feel a bit longer because it's farther out. So, as I said, even those stages, outside of maybe Yoshi's Story, just due to the fact that I'm gonna remove like everything besides Battlefield, that feels different enough due to its having this weird ledges, slants, platforms that go over but are longer than Battlefield. It's a very small blast zone, like actually has a unique advantage to it. But this stage ended up getting banned from most competitive scenes, as players just didn't necessarily like playing on it. It's so weird to me because like this stage, if you think of a character that associates with Yoshi's Story, sorry, I kept saying Yoshi's Island or Yoshi's Story. If you think of a stage that, a character that associates with it the most, you usually think of either one or two. Mario being able to kill off the top really easily, or me, Brawler, being able to really kill off the top very easily. My question is, because these characters do so well on this stage, is that the reason why we banned it? Because it's like, okay, we have to instant ban the stage no matter what against these characters? And people say like it feels similar to Battlefield, but it clearly isn't. Like Battlefield has bigger blast zones, smaller platforms, bigger base stage. There's definitely a difference, a noticeable enough difference when you're playing on these stages and how they function. Like characters with lower mobility actually like Yoshi's Story quite a bit because of the smaller layout and blast zones to kill earlier. And like when you think of also Mario, Mii, Brawler, these are two characters that have never won a major. Like these are the characters that probably find the most advantage from this stage, yet are not nearly as relevant to the top tier metas. The characters like Steve or Sonic, who are probably going to take the stage the least happily in terms of like actually the stage that could potentially hindrance their selection if they're picked against these characters. So that's why it gets like weird to me that we're getting rid of stages that help characters fight the meta that people don't like. And I make this video or talk this on stream and knowing that it's not going to change, because we're so late into the game's lifespan and just no one's gonna make the change at this point because the scene is so stagnant in terms of these things once you get this far into the scene, because no one wants to experiment anymore. Even though like everyone's like waiting for the next Smash game, but like that Smash game might not come for 3 fucking years. So why are we gonna deal with the meta that people don't like and not look for adjustments that are feasible for us to implement? I don't know. But what got me also thinking about this was playing a lot of Rivals 2. And even though there are stages in that game that I don't like, so if you're not familiar with Rivals 2, they have a pretty wide abundance of stages. 10 stages. Obviously, this game has stages that are designed for actual competitive platform fighter. But like, look at this over here. This is all the different layouts, all the different blast zones. And see how much more varied that is in comparison to what we play with in Ultimate. Now, obviously, as I said, they're designed this way. You have your 5 neutral stages. I don't remember all the names off the top of my head, but this one's similar to like Green Hill and Project M. This is your PS2. This is your Battlefield. This is their take on Smashville with hazards on. And this is pretty unique to itself of Rivals. There isn't really a stage like this in other games. But they're all pretty neutral. Like, for the most part, I can find a stage agreed upon that I want to play against my opponent on these 5. Pretty drastically different too from time to time. Like, whenever I play online or compete, my first stage pick isn't always the PS2 of the game or always the Smashville. Like, I end up on any of these starters because it just really depends on the matchup and who we both want to play on. It doesn't feel like there's one auto pick in the game, but their counter picks are vastly different in terms of what they offer. The Green Hill Zone is pseudo counter pick personally. It can feel like that, but I also play Loxodon, so I want the stage. But the counter picks in comparison are vastly different. You have Air Armada, which is not showcased, which doesn't have walls all the way that go all the way down, and 2 moving platforms similar to one of Town City's transformations. I fucking hate this stage. I probably ban it 99% of the time, but it's also a stage that I understand why it's in the game, and it's so different in terms of what it accomplishes in comparison to the others. I've almost said Ice Ice Outpost, but I'm pretty sure that's a Mario Kart 8 track. I don't know why these stages are still like not ingrained into my head just yet. But the Arctic stage is also different because it has its base platform you can actually jump through, but it has something in the middle for keeping you from like sharking underneath all the time. And it's not always the best answer to go through to recover, but it's different. Rockwall has the double platform and really, really close platform blast zones to the side. Kind of the game's WarioWare. Tempest Peak is the smallest stage by far in the game with 2 platforms that move around like this. The stages, despite looking like in terms of just basic platform layout that they might be the same, their blast zones, their mobility of the actual platforms moving around, and general differences in sizes, like these stages are obviously, of course, as I said, designed because of that's what their purpose is in terms of this game being competitive, but you feel the difference when playing this game. None of these stages feel like they are similar to one another. They all have a sort of a purpose in what they do. And that's why I fucking hate Ultimate Stage List, because like, sure, there is a difference between Smashville and Hollow Bastion. Sure, there kind of is a difference between Small Battlefield and Pokemon Stadium 2. But is it enough of a difference to justify having these stages together? Like, top blast zones is the same, platform layout's a bit different, stage length is a bit different. But if your character likes Small Battlefield, your character probably also likes PS2. The only thing that might be different is maybe your mobility. If you're a character that's slower, you might not like PS2 as much. But if you like Small Battlefield's layout, you probably are most of the time also going to like PS2. And your opponent probably needs to ban both of these stages. If your character likes Smashville, it probably likes Hollow Bastion. Very different blast zones, obviously. Well, not very different, like kind of different, shorter on the side because of stage and taller because of platform height. Stages kind of smaller, not super smaller, and it's easier to go under. But layouts of a single platform in the middle are the same. Your strategy for these stages are similar enough. Or at least they can be similar enough. You probably like both stages. If you like Final Destination, you probably also like Kalos. Now, the blast zones for Kalos are much bigger at the top. That is a big deal because if you like killing vertically, you probably don't like Kalos as much. But that big open middle area, you probably like that. That's kind of what I mean. And I feel like there's stages in this game that aren't utilized. If you stay hazards off, like, I feel like you could just merge Final Destination and Kalos into Wily Castle. And you're probably thinking, why Wily Castle? I mean, one, it is a very long stage, but two, there isn't a stage that doesn't benefit vertical killing. At least in my opinion, there isn't. A stage that there isn't a stage that isn't beneficial for people who like to kill vertically. I think having a stage that has a higher blast zone at the top compared to any other is sorely kind of missing. Unfortunately, the stage that benefits horizontal killing the most is WarioWare, but my god, that's maybe a little too much. It's definitely unique though. That's the thing, like, as much shit as we give WarioWare in comparison to, say, like the typical Battlefield, it's something that's like an actual counterpick. At least in terms of what the traditional sense of a counterpick is, there's characters who are really going to like this stage, even if some of the top tiers like it. Like, if you take Incineroar here, he can kill you probably at like 20 with a normal side B. And that's kind of what I mean when I say the counterpick. The idea of the counterpick is dead, because it doesn't feel like there's any stages in the game that truly give advantage to characters to help them fight against the meta picks, and the stages that do exist are really, really good for the meta. Now, obviously, there's some stages that, like, we've tried and do have glaring issues. Castle Siege being asymmetrical. Sure, it's a small stage, but this goes against maybe the core tenet of what a normal stage might have, where center stage is like the advantage of what the player gains if you control it. Because it's asymmetrical, the advantage comes to the player who has the high ground or something. Like, sure, I get it. So to me, the thing that I think about in terms of what I'd want to do, say if I ever am able to run a tournament of my own, I'd like to, but it's not in the cards right now. To me, a stage list for this game should I feel like hazards off has been what has neutered the stage list more than anything, and I get why we did it. It was exciting at the time. There was a lot of options of stages that could have been legal with hazards off, and then obviously a lot of players didn't like some of the stages, some of them very justifiably. But I felt like some stages just didn't get any time to actually grow on the player base. And even if you add Yoshi's Story and Lilac Cruise and Kalos back into the lineup or whatever, I still think that, at least to me personally, because I know this is very much a personal issue in terms of how I feel about the game, gets rid of the diversity of how stages function. So to me, first of all, put hazards back on. I think we have the stages that you need to replace the stages that were sorely missing back then with hazards on. You can create something that's like, okay, you have your tri-plat, you have your dual plat, you have your no plat, you have one single moving plat, and then your single plat. So you still have some of the stages that are still the same from the old one. And then the counterpicks feel a little more counterpicky. You have like, actually, I don't really know what fountain that's here, I'm not gonna lie. The stage I feel like Fountain's stage. I feel like Phantom stage transformations aren't that crazy, but sure. There might be a better pick here. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. Yoshi's Story has Randall, has smaller blast phones. Yoshi's Island Brawl has slants. Really not the devil. I'm gonna be real. I think a stage that small blast phones isn't the worst. Town City has its moving platforms back, and becomes the horizontal killing stage in comparison to the others. It's not amazing. There's probably other stages I'm just not remembering off the top of my head. I'm just doing this very quickly. But like these stages feel more distinct in their purpose. Honestly, I probably would get rid of Fountain of Dreams the more I look at it. I just don't know what it adds. But it's kind of my point. Like, the stages have more of a purpose. I don't feel like I need to ban a lot. Lylat, I would not add Lylat back. To be frank, Lylat was like we need a 5th stage for like Wii U, but I would say Lylat's nowadays doing too much. Like, you could maybe argue Pokemon Stadium 1, but I, once again, don't know if many people would want Pokemon Stadium 1's transformations. No, we could do, let's just say Northern Cave. Fuck it. We're just gonna throw it in here for now. And Northern Cave and FD are kind of the same. This is what I mean. Like, a lot of these stages, you could, at the end of the day, just do this, I guess. Yoshi's Story and Battlefield are kind of still similar enough, but you could arguably get rid of Yoshi's Story. But once again, as I said, the stages feel unique in what they do. Even if it's not a lot of them, it still, to me personally, feels less homogenized when all of the stages feel very different in their function. Like, we don't need necessarily PS2 anymore if we have Small Battlefield. We don't need Kalos if you have Northern Cave, but like Northern Cave also has its own issues. Smashville and Hollow Bastion become two very different instances of the stage. Town and City does not feel like an FD clone because it doesn't have the big like gap in the middle for its second transformation. The only stage here that really feels like it's arguable is Yoshi's Story ends up feeling pretty similar to Battlefield, but even then, like, it doesn't really. It still has, as I mentioned earlier, like, it has walls on the side, it has the tilts, it has platforms stick over the stage, so there's different ways to recover. Randall now exists, so that's a pretty big deal too. So yeah, I do think, to me personally, just the stage list and Ultimate just feels very homogenized, and they feel neutral, but I feel like the neutrality of these stages are what makes the top tier so dominant, because there aren't stages that potentially help benefit characters to help fight against the best characters in the game. That's how you can balance the game on your own without patches. Now, obviously, as I said, I don't think anything's going to change. I think we're going to be kind of stuck with the stage list that we have. Maybe if there's a Smash Ultimate Deluxe, maybe people will feel more inclined to try out new stages. But at the end of the day, also, if there was like a way to easily toggle hazards on and off in the actual stage selection, maybe then also you'd have like a mixed hazards rule set. Because then I could see that, like, implementations of stages like Smashville and Town and City, but still being able to utilize non-hazard stages that are pretty good too. Like, but you don't necessarily need them anymore, because despite how much groaning we give Fighters Pass 2, it did give us Hollow Bastion, and I mean, it wasn't part of the Fire Pass, but during the time we also got Small Battlefield, so it's like those stages don't necessarily need to be there anymore. They have like replacements of some sort. You can add more unique things, and it's kind of one of the things that I really appreciate about Rivals is that the stages are so unique in what they do. Even the stage that I hate the most, Air Armada, I still can appreciate what it does and why it exists in the game. I do hope it's removed next R2CS circuit, though. I think it's one of the stages that are just feels so fundamentally wrong in comparison to the rest of the game, because it doesn't have the ledges that you need to recover. But I do appreciate their ability to attempt to create counterpicks. Hey Google, stop. Oopsies. To create counterpicks that are, you know, actually designed to be not just simple stages, like are actually there's reasons your character don't want to go to the stage or do want to go to the stage, and there's actual advantageous, like real, not real, because there are advantages to choosing certain stages against characters in Ultimate as well, but they're more on, I don't even want to say extreme, they're just more realized. They're not as simple as in terms of like when I look at the blast zone comparison and stage size comparison here to the blast zone comparison of this 7. Honestly, even if I do like all of the stages that are used legally. Now, that could just be Ultimate stage design. I could just be bitching that Ultimate just doesn't have the stages it needs in the game itself to have that kind of diversity, but it's also like we weeded down the stages to this. So part of it is like the scene's choice of the matter.